Hello, here we are talking about coaching. My name is Yannick. I'm here with Sivash. We're missing Nikki today. Nikki couldn't make it today, unfortunately. Our thoughts are with her, and we miss her dearly for her fresh perspective as a coach who's not newly qualified anymore, but recently qualified. So I always value her kind of perspective of being at that point in her journey. That's part of what we're doing this year. So I can put our minds into a beginner's mindset for this next question. But I'm particularly excited to tap into your expertise, Sivash, because I know you've been working with a lot of coaches doing exactly what we've been asked. Because we've been asked, and I don't remember now who was sending us the question, but it's certainly a question we hear often, which is, how do I create a steady stream of clients? We've had an episode about how to create the next client, because that's often more helpful to kind of focus on, not about the entirety of clients. But moving on from that, I'm curious, and I know many coaches are curious about different ways how we can create a steady stream of clients, so that clients keep coming in, and maybe we don't have to do so much advertising or outreach or social media activity. What kind of systems are out there that allow us to get clients on the regular? While perhaps minimizing the kind of marketing side of things that I know a lot of coaches don't really enjoy. They want to do the coaching, right? They want to do the performance rather than all the businessy stuff around it. So I'm curious about your perspective, Sivash. I know you will have lots to talk about, but I'll just kind of open some space for you and see how long I can get you talking.
Yeah, cool. Well, I think it's a great question, right? Because once you make a bit of money, you want to find out, like, hey, how can I do this again and again? Because for most of us, right, we want to replace the job. We want to have like that regular income, that paycheck at the end of every month. Now, here's the thing, right? A steady stream of income, it could mean anything, right? So personally, like what I personally categorize in business, like I categorize 3 different phases in business. Again, you can do it in different ways, but I look at phase 1 as like building a coaching business from 0 to 5,000 a month. Phase 2 is like 5 to 20,000 a month, and phase 3 I put as 20 to 50,000 a month. And of course there can be a lot more, right? But here's the thing: is first of all,
can I just pause there for a moment, because I know many of the coaches sitting out there will be like, what the hell is phase 2 and 3? That's crazy. A lot of the coaches that I work with on building their business, that they would be super happy with £2,000, which is like what, $2,500, €3,500, $3,000, something like that. A lot of coaches would already be super happy with. So hearing above 5,000 a month is already like that seems unreachable for so many coaches, right?
Yeah, it is. And I think it is not something that everyone aspires to. And I think, we don't need to talk about that, but I think the reason I make the distinction is because you need kind of like different way of working. You need like different strategies to go to go to that level. And that's why it's important to actually start with kind of like that, with your goal in mind, right? Like, okay, if my goal is to, like when I started I had to replace my job income, which was $1,000 a month, which wasn't much. But then my wife lost her job, and then it became $2,500. Right? And we got a baby, and then it became $3,500. Right? And we got a second baby. Right? So you get an idea. Like what we want to do is just understand, like, how much money do I need so I can do my work. And then again, right? We need to understand the basic needs.
Yeah.
But I personally also prefer, that I enjoy investing in myself. So I know that, hey, my needs are a bit more. I want to invest.
You need a huge coaching budget, Sivash. I know who you work with.
Yeah. I love reading books. I love, going to courses, investing, coaching, mentoring. But it's, again, understanding where your personal needs are, and then maybe also thinking what are the extras I want, maybe a holiday, right?
Yeah, I think that's really helpful to distinguish between the 3 phases. I'm sure we could do an episode for each of them. So maybe we focus on the phase 1.
Yeah, definitely. So, and here's the thing, right? When I think about business, I want a business that's sustainable and predictable. And also scalable, but here you don't really need to think about scalable if you want to stick with phase one, right? But we want that steady paycheck. When we go to a job, we work 40 hours a week, and then at the end of the month, we get a nice paycheck. We kind of know where that paycheck is. And of course, the reality is, as an entrepreneur, as a coach, it's not always going to be the same, but there are skills that we can learn, right? And that's why I personally tend to focus is what do I need to learn? What do I need to get good at? What is the process that I need to do, right? What do I need to do daily, weekly, monthly to get that income, right? So the question was, how do I create a steady stream of clients, right? So
it sounds like you have a system.
Yeah, there is a system. It's when you do something for yourself, often we can just go, and it almost happens unconscious. But when we start teaching it, we have to bring it to a conscious level. So I spend a lot of hours actually thinking about this. And the way I look at it is very much like, look, we have the process that's in our control, and the result, the stream of clients, is not actually in our control, right? But it's created by the activities that we do. Right. So the first thing would be is to focus on a few skills. And I know that, what you mentioned there around marketing, when I started, I didn't really enjoy marketing, but actually learning about marketing, learning about sales is really fundamental to growing a sustainable business, right? So there's 3 skills that are really essential: becoming good at marketing, becoming good at sales, and becoming good at coaching. Right. So just doing a coaching qualification is not really enough in my view. You have to really become good at that. So having supervision, having someone else that can give you feedback.
Yeah.
Right.
And often the coaching is over amplified, and marketing and sales is certainly something that I stayed away from for a long time because I had a misconceptions about what it actually means. And I totally agree that once we learn about what that actually is, and we find some people who do it in a way that we can respect and really resonate with, that helps a lot. So I think it might be helpful to just kind of put a frame around what marketing and what sales actually mean.
Yeah, 100%. I think because the phrase itself doesn't necessarily help. Like, okay, I need to learn sales, and you go buy a bunch of books, right? So I think in terms of sales, we just need to learn. We talked a little bit about charging before, right? But you need to learn. Yeah, you need to learn to communicate and articulate how you can help someone, right? And it's not so much about learning all the benefits and the features of your package, but the truth is people don't really care about your package. They just want to know, can you help me? How do you help me? Right? So the sales part is just really being able to, it's kind of the bridge, right? You can have a great coaching session or discovery session that some coaches do, right? But then the bridge between someone starting, that's where sales happens. It's that little bit. Sometimes it's a 20-minute conversation. Sometimes it's a 10-minute conversation. But there's a process to that.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that's really important to understand, is that in marketing, we build that bridge. We make a connection into a conversation. We build a connection so somebody knows that we exist. So there's an entrance point into a conversation, into some contact between you and a prospect, a potential client, not a client yet. And the sales part is when you actually have had that conversation, and then at the end of that conversation, you figure out how you can help them, and then there's the closing part, which is, I think, different yet, is when you have sold something, which meant you have made it clear what the outcome might be, or what it is that you're offering. I in my head still, when I say sales, I have a negative association. So I'm trying to avoid the word sales. In my head, it became offering my help, because that's something I'm really down with. Sales to me still sounds like somebody's manipulating me into buying into something that I don't really need, but I'm genuinely offering help, and I genuinely believe that what I have to offer will help them. And if you're not genuinely convinced that your offering is going to help somebody, then that's what you need to work on first, because if you're confident about what you're providing, the space that you hold, even if the outcome is a potential and not a certainty, because it's not up to us, then you can offer that And I was able to offer that with far more confidence and far more hubris, far more energy, because I knew that was going to help them, or at least have the potential to help them. And I would want that person to do what they just described to me. I was really excited about that person telling me about their vision and what they want to do. And I want them to be that person and do those things. And I know that my space has potential to do that. So if I make those bridges and if I show them what they're buying, that's the sales process. And that's the sales process I'm down with.
Yeah. And I think, I think a lot of us have that experience with, like, a negative experience with sales. And unfortunately, I think it's created because of, how a lot of salespeople are, right? Like, we go to the mall and, there's someone trying to sell you perfume, or they're in your face, they're constantly trying to sell you something, right? And for me, like, what was really helpful is similar. I think, sales is service, right? How can I help this person? How can I serve this person? But I think, personally, I think as coaches, we want to do things a bit different. That's why I personally don't think that the traditional way of doing discovery calls really works for most coaches, unless you have a really good profile, right? And people already know, like, okay, like, they're Rich Litvin, and this is kind of actually happening in my business, right? Where I have actually salespeople working for me now, right? So we've kind of created a different way of doing things, but it's because my profile is, I've established myself, right? But for the first 4 years of my coaching career, right, it was about me giving people an experience. And that's really what I encourage coaches to do, is to give people an actual real experience. Don't just, like, try to, it's like, imagine this, like, if you have this, I like donuts, right? I imagine you have this donut, right?
I thought you said dollars. I like dollars.
This is, my wife loves donuts, and, she's kind of transferred that to me. But imagine, like, if you're speaking about a donut to someone and you're saying, like, you're describing the texture, you're describing the taste and all that. It's not the same as just saying, like, hey, dude, you should try this, like, take a bite. And you're like, you take a bite and you're like, wow, like, what's inside this? Tell me, like, where can I get more of these? And that's what we want to do as coaches, right? There's a difference between talking about coaching, talking about the concept of coaching, and actually giving people an experience, right?
So how do you do that so that it happens regularly?
What do you mean?
How do you do that so that it happens regularly? Because I'm sure many coaches will be up for giving somebody an experience, but how can you create the space to give people experiences on a regular basis?
Yeah, so that's kind of like the marketing piece, right? So this, for me, this is part of the sales process, is actually giving people a powerful experience. And that's why, like, I think in the Prosperous Coach book, Rich and Steve talk about creating clients, because often people come into coaching, they're not thinking, like, oh, I have this budget and I'm going to hire this coach, right? But in that moment, in that session, the client is created because of that experience, right? And we've all had that, right? You step into a car, right? And you're like, oh, I don't really think I'm going to buy this car. But then you go for the test drive and you're sold, right? So that's kind of that part of the sales process. In the way I see marketing, I want to simplify marketing. It's not about posting every day on social media. It's not about putting yourself out there, being visible, all the other stuff that people talk about, right? While some of those things are useful, essentially for me, marketing is about being able to connect to people that you want to work with, connect to people that you can help.
Right.
So that connection piece, right? So we want to invite people into the call, as we said, right?
Yeah.
The marketing helps us. And yes, for me, part of that is creating content, right, on social media. But again, that's for me with the intention to create a business that can grow from 5K to 2K a month. Because
social media is a wonderful way to reach a lot of people at the same time. The general process is the same thing. You're creating an entry point into a conversation with you. And you can do that by going to regular events and having conversations there, or calling people up and go for catch-ups, lunches, coffees with individuals and have conversations. That's a point to connect with people. But you can only have so many lunches with so many people. You know, that's why social media for many people is quite helpful, because you can reach a lot more people with with one thing that you're saying. You know, you're not saying it to one person, so it's less powerful, because, you know, it's people might not feel you're talking directly to them. And I think this is where the art, when you use one-to-many kind of engagements through content. But if you're in a one-to-one conversation, you speak to somebody directly, so it's a lot more powerful. But also you speak to only one person and not 100 or 10 or 2,000 or 50,000, depending on how large your network is on social. But they're all the same thing. They're creating an entry point into a conversation with you. They're creating some form of experience.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the key is it's not about being on social media all the time, right? I think a lot of coaches find that draining, right? I don't like being there all the time, right? But it's about actually being able to create a message, understand who you want to help, right? Understand their frustrations, understand their fears, and then from a genuine place, actually connect to that, right? So if you know that you work, for example, you know, with professional moms that are struggling to juggle, you know, the work and the kids, right? And you've been through that, right? You can actually connect with them.
Yeah, you can figure out where those spaces are, where they're at.
Yeah, you can figure out where they are, but also even just through, so marketing can be both online and offline, right? But it's through, whether it's online or offline, it comes back to the same thing. You need to understand how to communicate to that, how to connect to them, so they can actually see that, hey, you know, this is a coach that could potentially help me. Yes, you could also, sometimes you can talk more generically about, you could sometimes talk a little bit about the benefit of coaching, but that's why usually there's a bit of disconnect, right? While it's good to educate people and raise their awareness around what coaching can do, people don't actually buy coaching. We said this earlier, right? People buy the result, like they want to lose weight, they want to improve their relationship, they want to gain confidence, they want to get clarity on life. Right? So what we want to understand is like, what do people want, or what does my people want? Like, right? And that's essentially for me, like, so to create that kind of loop back to the original question, right? What I want to help coaches with, like in the first phase, like getting from 0 to 5,000, is just getting good at, you know, understanding who they help. So as part of marketing is like understanding who they help and how they can connect with them. How can we get like every week? How can we get every week 2 people in the calendar, or 5 people, or 10 people that we can help? And then we connect that with sales.
Can I just throw something in there briefly, because that question around niching comes up a lot, and I know we have an episode on niching, but at this point I think it's worth mentioning, because when you go that kind of route, when you do put messages out there, when you put help out there, when you're trying to figure out places where your clients are, where their attention is, where do you need to place your message or your help, it really helps to know who do you want to help and what your niche is, so to speak, different levels of niches. But if you're just around and you don't have a niche, maybe you don't want a niche, maybe you don't want to niche down, you know, niches help because they make marketing more effective. That's why they exist, and it's really effective. But I know plenty of coaches who don't have a niche, but what they have is conversations. They're engaged in their communities. They go regularly with events and they create conversations and they help people. You know, they put content out there that helps people, and they have conversations that help people, and they're genuinely curious and committed to people in their networks, and they have created some form of community, or they're part of different communities, and they show up regularly, and they show up helpful, you know, so they don't need a niche, you know, because the niche is them and they're having conversations, and coaching can be applicable to so many different things with exactly the same process, because you don't need any expertise necessarily. You don't need to know what helps people with a particular demographic, you know, because you can hold space.
The interesting thing is, right, well, and I was like that in the beginning, like, oh, I don't have a niche. But if you ask them, so if you ask those coaches, like, who do you love working with? What's the kind of, like, what type of people do you like working with? Right? They usually will give you a description. I like working with people. I like with people that are fun, or people that, you know, are into personal development. And then you ask them questions like, who do you not want to work? And they give you a list of things. So usually, even if we don't think we have a niche, we can ask ourselves some questions to get clear about the type of person. Right? So I want to, in the beginning, I want to work with people. And I realized much later, it was just a version of me. I thought, hey, someone that's interested in growing.
That happens so often.
Right? But that's it. Like, we just have to understand, like, who do we like? Because if we look at the last 10 clients we worked with, there's usually a pattern. There's a similarity.
Yeah.
Right. In my first year, I worked with a mom of 9 children. I work with students.
9.
Yeah. There's one person that I work with. She had 9 kids, and most of, on average, there was like two or three of them inside the session, which is really awkward. But and I worked with students, head teachers, but there was a similarity between them. The characters, the characteristics, they were very similar. Right. Their ambitions were very similar. They had they had certain things, and that's what we can do with the marketing part. Is just understand, like, okay, every time I go to this meeting or this networking event, I connect with people because they like me. We have this similar interest. We like golf, we like soccer, we like yoga, right? So there's usually something there. And that's what I want to do. Is actually, for me, it's not about like every coach that wants to make 5,000 a month needs a niche, right? I don't think that that's necessarily true, but I think it's understanding who do you want to help. Sometimes it's a combination of things. Like, I'm a parent, right? So a lot of my clients are actually parents, and I don't market to parents, right? And for me, faith is important. So a lot of my clients often come to that, even if it's different faith. I have a client that's Jewish, Christian, Buddhist, but often faith is important for them. Another thing is, for example, personal development. For me, that's so usually also when we look at our own core values, right? When we look at what is really important for us, and at some level, we actually communicate that. We put that out there, right? I had one person actually contacted me 2 years ago and said, hey, look, you don't know me, but, I've been following you. I'm religious. Family is really important to me. And I don't know what the third thing was. I think it was sports. I really like sports. I've been looking at a lot of business coaches, but I can resonate because I see that's important for you in your way you're putting out there. And that wasn't even part of my strategy, right?
Yeah.
But when we put things out there,
that similarity creates trust. If somebody's more like you, if you see somebody who seems to be similar to your worldview and values and beliefs, people have that baseline level of trust already. And that creates trust is such an important part of getting somebody to want to enter a conversational space or book a consultation. I've noticed that as well. These days, most people who book consultations, they already know me to some extent, even if I've never met them or never heard of them.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's, and again, I think that it's good actually to add that to your marketing, right? With the intention to connect with the right people.
Yes.
Right. Not like, oh, I'm going to put baby pictures so I can get some more parents to contact me. Right. But again, it's really with being intentional about being you. Right. I think at the core of this is being you, like finding out what really works for me. And here's the thing. Look, when it comes to marketing and sales, like the business part of things, often in the beginning, it's really uncomfortable, but it's because we haven't put a lot of time and attention there. And what I can tell you, as I'm going almost into being a coach for 5 years, right? When you actually spend more time in sales, it's nothing strange. Sales is really much about the psychology of why people do what they do, right? So it makes you a better coach. Marketing, the same thing, is about understanding how can we actually connect with people? How can we grab their attention?
I think the marketing thing is the most important bit here, it seems, because the sales seems to come later. If we want to get a steady stream of clients, then first of all, we need to have a steady stream of conversations. And one thing that sticks out very clearly is we need to be active in our communities, and if we don't feel we have community, then I guess we need to create community. If there aren't events in your area, maybe you need to start those events. If social media connects with you and it's something that you could do authentically, if you want to connect, find ways to connect with people. And when you connect with people, then I think one of the skills we need to learn is, how do I invite somebody from a connection I make, from a casual conversation with anybody, into a space where they can potentially become a coaching client? When you just meet somebody at a network event, mentioning that you're a coach, offering value already, creating a space in that conversation where somebody is feeling helped, or they have they build a relationship with you. And this can be through a podcast or through content on social media. But I think it's probably more powerful if it's you holding an event and being at the front of a room talking to people, or when you're in one-to-one conversations. But the more conversational space, the more opportunities you create for people to get to know you, the better. And I think if you pair that, just being out there, with active invitations for people to come and, oh, you talked about this and you talked about that and you talked about this. I'm not sure if you knew, but I'm having those kind of conversations for a living. And if you wanted to maybe explore whether, coaching might be right for you, why don't we take this into my office? Why don't we take this into a more formal conversation and I tell you a bit more about it? No strings attached. And I think that invitation, that kind of call to action, is something that a lot of coaches struggle with. So I wonder what you think about that on social media, saying, hey, why don't you do this? Or I'm holding this event, or I have space for new coaching clients, or, invitations in a conversation to that. How do you think about that? What's some of those strategies?
I think it's really essential, right? It's because we often hear about, okay, you need to be posting regularly, right? But
posting regularly.
I think it's what's really important, and this is something that I learned in the hard way, right? Because I was creating a lot of value in the world, and people were liking stuff, commenting stuff, and even giving feedback on stuff. But what I've personally noticed is that most people are passive, right? Yeah. And every month I have one person, and sometimes it's two people that actually message me and say, hey, I want to find out more about you. But even now, right, most of our business comes from being proactive, right? So what I personally, I like this this balance between, give, and then ask, like 3-to-1 ratio, right? It's not, again, it's not, sometimes it can be more. There needs to be more giving, but it's again about that, being regular in that. If you're always giving, if you're creating value in the world, right, you want to make sure that there's a balance, like 3-4 days in a week you're giving, 1 day in a week you're creating an invitation. And the invitation doesn't need to be like, super direct. I don't think that really serves us as coaches. Some people do that and they do okay on social media. Personally, it puts me off, right? If someone is saying like, oh, I have 2 coaching spots available for 2,500 each, like really directly saying like, if you want to buy my coaching, contact me, right? So the way I see it more is like, I like to give in public and sell in private.
Right.
So what I personally think about marketing is just making it simple. We want to connect with people, and content's a great way to connect with people. But it's again making sure you're doing it to serve, not just as a means to an end, but making the content actually valuable. But then every week, for example, having an invitation. So what we do, for example, a simple invitation could be, hey, I am, next Friday, I'm bringing a group of people together on Zoom, right, for a free coaching session. If you would do a group session, or it could be an invitation, could be simply, next week I'm opening up 3 spots in my calendar for a free coaching session. So we're not saying like, hey, I have 3 spots in my program, right? What we want to do is just go to the next step. We talked about, right? So the first step is connect, then the invite. And here we want to play around with different types of invitations, but ideally the invitation has to be, we don't want to invite people straight into, getting married. We want to invite people into a date, just to make it more simple, right? We want to invite people into the next step, not into 5 steps further.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right? And when we get good at inviting people, and by the way, like inviting, I think I mentioned this in a previous podcast episode, but for me, the last few years, I've become very conscious about the language I use, and most of the time it's really neutral. So I just say like, hey, when I invite someone, it's like, hey, I really like what you're doing, and when they tell me about their goals, their challenges, right? And usually that happens in the connect piece. I just say, hey, would you like what about we have a conversation about that? I might have some ideas, or right, I might be able to coach you on that. So usually my invitation is very simple. It's not so much like, it doesn't create this idea of that, oh, now they're going into a formal session, right? Right. So, and again, I learned this from Steve, and I think it worked really well. If we just get good at inviting people into a conversation, so they're not just saying like, come to my clinic, right? You're gonna get a session, and it might work for some people. But I personally, what I've seen is when we say, you know, you want to have a discovery session, you want to have a coaching session, sometimes it feels like people feel like, oh, I'm gonna get sold to, right?
Yeah, they need to feel safe.
Yeah, so getting good at inviting people, but invite them into a conversation or into a coaching session, right? Yeah. But not into your program straight away.
Right, yeah. And the more you do it, the more comfortable you get with it. And I often say, and I've noticed that myself, that the more comfortable I am having that conversation, the more comfortable the person in front of me is, because it just seems something that is not awkward, you know?
Yeah, and you know, you can have simple things around this, right? You can, if I notice there's resistance, I just tell people like, hey, look, this is not a sales conversation. Like, you can leave your wallet at home. And I mean that, right? So in my first call, my rule for myself and all the coaches that I work with is like, we don't ask people to marry on the first date, right? It's just, you freak them out. It doesn't matter how great the connection is. Don't invite them into your program after the first session. Just create a great experience. Invite them into another session, you know, possibly give them a bit of homework, focus on making a difference rather than, you know, enrolling them into your program.
Yeah. Although I think it's also important that we don't do that too often, because then I think clients get used to getting stuff from you for free. You know, I've worked with some coaches who offered like, you know, 3 or even 6 free sessions. And if you want to invite them into a program after that, you know, why, like, they're so used to working with you for free already. So
yeah. Well, I think it's a good point, right? I think there has to be a professional boundary, right? But usually there's no magic number. But, you know, I remember asking Steve years ago, like, what's the average amount of free sessions you get? And he said 3. And I know for some great coaches, it's 2. But there are coaches, I think, and I think, if I'm correct, Rich does it. He gives someone one really powerful session, and at the end of that session is usually the proposal.
He used to. Right? He changed that now. The more recent video I've seen, he does a much shorter one, like half an hour, just to connect, and then he gives some homework to see, checks the commitment, you know, and then they come back, and then, you know, he used to be like in the Prosper shows, he talks about having a 2-hour session. I still work with that. I really like it. But I have like 2 or 3 free sessions built into one space that I don't charge anything for. I would erase the word free from our vocabulary anyway, because people pay with attention, and they pay with commitment, they pay with time, you know, they pay with other resources. It's like, I'm happy to sit down with you, I'm not going to charge you any money for it, you know, but there are expectations that I have. There's an exchange happening, and I think that's important to recognize.
You know, I think, you know, coming back to, look, I think throughout this, right, and I don't know if people can see it. Let me actually show that. I like to, so here I've drawn this, right? And the way I see it.
Can you talk people who are listening through it? Because I see a circle. I can't quite see the what is written.
Yeah, it's a circle. So on top of it, I put marketing, which really is connecting. And sorry about that. That's what happens when you're on the phone. But so here's the thing, right? The way I see it, it's a circle, right? And they're all connected. So marketing, you can think about marketing as connecting and inviting, being able to connect with people and invite people. When you do that well, you go to coaching. You don't go to sales, right? It allows you to coach more people, right? And the way I look at it is, when you coach people, you give them a powerful experience, whether it's in the first session or second session or third session, then you want to go into the sales part. Then you want to say, hey, you know, we had 2 great sessions, you know, we talked about your goals, challenges, blah, blah, blah. You know, would you like to know how I can help you get there? Would you like to know how I can help you with that? Right? So it's asking permission to then going to the sales part.
Yeah. Would you like to have more of these conversations? Is a question I often like to ask.
Would you like to experience more of this? Would you like to continue having these conversations? And again,
fantastic.
It doesn't need to be always goal related.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's just that, right? They will see like, wow, this conversation has been so powerful. Well, like with my current one-on-one coach, there's no agenda. It's about what I bring to the session. But after that first one, I was like, wow, I need more of these, right? It was so helpful.
Right. So then marketing, coaching, then into sales. What's the fourth one in the circle?
Yeah. So the fourth one for me is coaching, because once we sell someone into our program, that's when we can continue coaching them. Right. So for me, the sales part actually just helps us continue coaching. And that's what also language. I don't often say like, would you like to start coaching with me? Would you like to continue coaching?
Right.
Because we've already started coaching, right? And we continue. So it's not a new thing. It's not a thing like, oh, how is coaching with him gonna be like? I only spoke to him for 1 hour, but if they already had an experience, like, wow, if I experience this much in a week or in 2 weeks, imagine what it will be like to just have more of these, right? So, and then coaching leads to, for me, I connected back to marketing. The reason is because if you get good results with people, right, you get testimonials, you get, referrals. So referrals, renewals, right? That all comes from being a great coach. Right. So that, again, people talk about it, right? We know that with great movies, we know that with anything that's really good, people talk and they spread the word.
Yeah.
Right. So for me, coaching leads to, again, comes back to marketing.
Yeah, that makes sense. So if you create more of an awareness in your own business, how many conversations, how many events, how much social media output, how many trainings, how many networking lunches do you need to go to or schedule to have how many conversations? How many of these conversations on average lead to a client who wants more of those conversations? How many of those will lead to paying coaching clients, and how much do you charge? And then you can figure out a system for yourself that works for you. Regardless of what your approach to marketing is, whether that's on social media or you never touch social media, whether you drive whether you drive engagement to your website or whether you don't have a website, whether you go to events or you never leave the house, it doesn't matter. But if you learn how much of the engagement leads to how many conversations, leads to how many clients to sign up in the end, you get a sense for it. And once you have a sense for that, or even quite good numbers when it comes to like advertising, for example, how many leads do you get? Once you know that, you can figure out what you need to do in order to get a steady stream of clients. There is a error margin, it's not always the same. Sometimes you have an unusual month and 10 conversations only lead to one client who signs up instead of 5 or 7 as, usual for you. We can account with some of that with, some cushion that you put into a pot in your bank account, for example, or into scheduling more clients than you need. But it gives you a good sense for how much activity and what exactly the activity is that you need in order to create how many paying clients. And that's how you get a steady stream of income.
Yeah, and you actually come to something that I missed there, right? So that's actually the fourth skill. Because yes, you need to be a great coach, you need to learn marketing, sales. The fourth one, I call it planning and numbers, right? I haven't come up with a nice name for it yet.
Analytics.
Yeah, it's actually understanding data, right? It's knowing that, okay, well, if I'm posting 3 times a week, right, and I'm getting every week 3 people into my calendar, and from those 12 people every month, I'm getting 3 clients. So okay, hey, 12 conversations lead to 3 clients. There's one in 4, right? No, sorry. Yeah. So the idea is to understand the numbers. I've worked with one coach and she hardly posted on social, right? I think she made 57,000, exactly that, a year, right? Yeah, 57. And in every 4 conversations, she get one. In every 4 conversations, she got 3 clients, so 75%, which is quite high. But she got most people that she would meet, whether through networking events or she was part of a working space where sometimes she could do a talk. There were meetings, right? So she was really good at connecting with people in person.
Mhm.
But that was for her formula. When people in the second session, when it would go to a conversation around working together, often the number would drop,
Mhm.
right? And it's again finding out what's the right number for you. Like usually, and when I actually interviewed her, and what I found out is that in the third conversation, people get a really powerful experience of working with her, because they've seen, they've had 3 sessions with her. She gives a lot of homework. She really connects with them. So for her, like this 3 weeks is really part of the 6 months that she works with clients. So she works in a 6-month package. I think she charges 6,000 for coaching. But that's the idea, right? Is actually she doesn't see it as, oh, these are just sessions that I'm doing to sign someone up, right? This is almost like part of the work. And of course, when people say no, it's okay. It's another relationship that's built. She will get
Yeah.
sometimes referrals from people that say no, right?
Yeah.
Because they've had such a powerful experience. She had people that came back after a year. So I think it's really good to actually write down the numbers. You don't need lots of numbers. You just need to, at the very minimum, you need to write down, okay, June week 1, I had 5 conversations. June week 2, like we want to understand, like, how many calls did we get in the calendar? What's happened? How many said yes? How many said no? How many are interested? So you get an idea of what's happening, because the numbers also reflect. The numbers can tell you, right? Maybe you're actually, and this is something that coaches don't like to hear, right? Because often it's like, oh, I'm not good at sales. But when I speak more about what's actually happening in those sessions, often find out that coaches are not being very impactful, because they're just trying, and I was there myself, trying to impress, talking more about how we can help. That's not really being impactful, right? But actually, so the numbers tell us how good we are doing in the coaching. The numbers tell us how good we're doing in sales. Sometimes it reflects also the marketing, right?
Yeah.
Because the actual relationship often starts in the marketing part.
Yeah, and I do want to add that it gives me the shivers to think about analyzing my numbers and keeping good records and keeping track of how many conversations I have. And I struggled with this for a long time, and I still struggle with it. I did outsource it now to have somebody else look at my numbers. It was important to keep some records, but I don't operate in that way. And it's part of the reason why my business is not 10 times bigger than it is now. And I recognize that, and I'm okay with it. I'm quite happy with where I am and the speed that I'm moving at. But I know exactly what I would need to do in order to grow my business 10x in the next, 2 years, because I know it's possible. If I was to apply that kind of process to really figure out what is my most impactful marketing activity. I go a lot with the flow, and I do what I feel like. This podcast was born out of just having those kind of conversations, and at some point just starting to press record. This is not a marketing exercise that I'm doing, but I certainly noticed that people who come to consultations more often now mention the podcast. Coaches who come into supervision groups. By the way, groups, memberships, really good way to create steady income or steady clients. But that's probably another one for another episode. But I did a lot of things just because I felt like them, but I certainly noticed a big impact once I actually started to look at who my clients are, where they're from, where do they know me from. I started building a question into my pre-questionnaire for people who come to consultations. Just, hey, I'm really curious. How did you find me? And that's really good data to record. I make a little note on my notes when I meet somebody new, just to figure out, which kind of activity they're coming through. And then you know what works, and you can do more of it. And you figure out what doesn't work, and then you can do less of it. While I get that somebody hates analytics, it really does work.
And like personally, I don't really, it's not something that lights me up, but you can do it in a simple, you don't need like a boring spreadsheet. You can, whatever works for you, you can just have a little paper where you keep track of the numbers. So you at least know, like in my very first 4 months as a coach starting out, I had 45 conversations, I had 15 clients, right? And I thought, oh, okay, interesting. So 1 in 3 is becoming a client. And I thought, well, let me actually ask, like, I'll start looking at my calendar, like, what went wrong in the other ones? And then I saw like, well, hey, 10 of them actually were just random people that I invited into a call, right? So what it helps us do is just raise our awareness about around different parts of our business.
Yeah.
Are we just inviting anyone into the call, right? Because if you just go on the street and say, hey, would like free coaching, and you get anyone to come into a call, it won't be the same, right?
Yeah.
But if you get people that actually show interest, like, hey, you know, I actually, you know, I want to improve my relationship. I want to improve a certain area of my life. When someone already has a certain desire or just want more clarity, or I've been stuck on this issue, right? There's already like a desire there.
Yeah.
Right. And again, we can go much deeper on this, but to just kind of bring it together, I think, look, when it's in the first phase, we don't need to complicate things. In the second phase and third phase, it gets a little bit more, there's more moving pieces. It can get a bit more complicated, right?
Let's
But
keep that for another time.
Yeah, in the 0 to 5,000, and again, 5,000 is a great income. You know, that's the, you know, your life can change as a result of that. You can have a good, you know, good life with that. You can live in a nice place. You can, you know, invest in yourself, right? That's, I think, over 80% of coaches, I think, earn less than that, right? So I think but it's simplifying. I think simplifying, get good at, you know, coaching, which is usually the first thing we spend more time on, but then, you know, invest a little bit in marketing, invest a little bit in sales, and remember that you can do it in your way. You don't need to do, you know, we didn't talk about doing webinars. We didn't talk about, you know, there's so many ways of doing marketing, and often we see coaches do that, but often that some of these things come in phase 2 and phase 3. Some of the things you never need to do it, because it's just, you know, it's not necessarily part of a moving business. And the great thing about coaching is there's so many different ways of doing it, right? But my personal invitation is to simplify it. Get good at connecting with people, get good at inviting people, you know, get good at giving them a great experience, and then get good at making proposals. Right?
And I would say, use your strengths, use the things that you're good at. Some things you can become good at, even though it doesn't light you up. Some things that don't light you up, they sometimes light you up later when you learn what that actually is about and when you start getting into it. But if you already know what you're naturally good at, where your natural character strengths are, and you use that in a way in marketing, you know, create something that's playful, if that's, you know, if that lights you up. If you're quite an analytic person, you know, then the analytics part will light you up. You know, there's so many ways in which we can do marketing. So once you find somebody, a role model, or once you find your own creative way to create those kind of touch points with potential clients, it will come across authentic because it actually resonates with you. And some of these things you're just going to have to give a go and see what it's like. I didn't like writing. Now I really like writing my nuggets because I committed to it and I've been doing it and I felt the impact. And then once you get the feedback, which is clients signing up or people telling you that this is really valuable, chances are you're going to keep it going just because it now became intrinsically valuable.
Yeah, and I think that's a great, you know, point there, right? Is that to create that steady stream of income, there are some activities that you need to repeat. Whether it's like I do 2 Facebook lives every week in my Facebook group, and I've noticed that that's a great way for me to constantly like get new clients and get not so much new clients, get new conversations coming, right? And so it's understanding, like, I know that, for example, Rich Litton wrote 1 article a week for 7 years. And now only last year he went to 2. But here's the thing, what a lot of people don't know is his writing has produced like a 7-figure business. And yes, of course, he has hundreds of videos on YouTube where he's showing people, you know, he's demonstrating his coaching, right? But again, it shows that there are different ways. It could be an article a week. It could be, you know, 1 video a week. It could be a 1 podcast a week. But often there's something that needs to be repeated. So there are more connections. They're continuously like seeds planted.
Yeah. And right? To become better at it as well.
Yeah, you get better at the skill, right? Often we look at like, oh, I posted this thing and I thought it was really good, but I got 0 likes and 0 comments. And we kind of like, we overthink things. You want to create 100. 100 videos, 100 podcasts, 100 articles, and, focus on serving. Yeah, of course, get some feedback on it, but don't be too attached to the outcome.
Yeah.
And I think that if we shift our focus to like, hey, getting good at these skills, that's where fundamentally change. And the good news is, right, we're not going to talk about 20,000, 50,000. The good news is, if you build your fundamental skills here, then that's what will help you also grow further. So for those of you that want to grow further, it all comes back to these skills, right? Because I got good at these skills, it allowed me to scale the business further.
Yeah, and also keep in mind that a lot of people are passive consumers. Just because you don't get the likes or you don't get the engagement, 100%. Or even you don't get the feedback on the event that you held, chances are there's people who go away with a lot of value and they would give you their attention again, even you don't know you have their attention. So trust in that and to continue doing it, not get so over-reliant on immediate gratification, will really help. And I don't like to do things regularly in a disciplined way, but I certainly learned over time that if you show up regularly and you keep providing value, that creates trust because you keep showing up, and it keeps yourself in people's spheres of awareness, even if it is a baby picture, your name pops up in their feed and your existence, they'll get reminded of your existence.
Yeah. And I think we can have another episode on this, right? About, the difference between what a professional coach is and an amateur coach. And I can say this from experience. Like, I was an amateur coach for the first year and a half. I thought I was being professional, but here's the thing, that unfortunately, like most coaches, right, including me at the beginning, we go too much into our feelings, right? And one thing that's definitely need to be said is, if you want a steady stream of income, whether it is 2,000, 5,000 or 10, you need to be showing up as a professional, which means often having a structure like, okay, you clock in at 9, clock out at 5, but you have work that you're doing, right? But again, that's for another day.
That's another day.
You have to put the work in, right? You have to really put the work in. It's not just about laptop lifestyle on the beach. That, unfortunately, is not how it works.
Yeah, even though there are some for which it works, and those are the stories that are being put out there, usually to sell you how to become a 6-figure coach business courses.
Yeah.
Anyway, Siavash, thank you so much. I think there was so much value in this. We did go a lot longer than we had in mind. So I think that's where we're going to leave it for today. Thank you, everybody who's listening. We really appreciate your questions and we really appreciate your attention, whether you engage or not. So thank you for that. I hope this continues to be useful. And thank you, Siavash, and greetings out to Nikki, who is with us in thoughts and who we gonna welcome back for our next episode.
Yeah, and if you are one of those that just like to watch or listen and don't comment, that's okay. But I invite others to share your takeaways with us and share with us like your experience when it comes to charging more and also to creating that steady stream of income.
I'm sure there's a lot of other ideas.
Questions?
I'm sure there's a lot of other ideas how you can create more steady clients. I'd love to hear them.
There is not one way. There's lots of roads that lead to Rome.
Cool. All righty. Let's leave it here. Thank you, Siavash.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you for being with us today. I appreciate your commitment to learning and growing as a coach. Just a few things before you go. First of all, we're doing this for you, so if there's anything you'd like us to talk about, do send us a question. Secondly, we're not doing this for profit, so we rely on your support to help us reach as many coaches as we can. So if you can send this episode to a friend or tell a fellow coach about what we're doing here, maybe you can subscribe or leave us a review, or even support us on Patreon. That would be amazing. And lastly, you can find us across all major platforms. So whether you like to watch or you like to listen or you like to download episodes and listen to it in your car while you're driving through somewhere with no internet, you can do so too. And that's it from us. Thank you, and I hope to see you next time.